Good day, ladies and gents. We're on module A3, Empires, Power, Resistance, Legacies. How do empires begin? How do empires begin? Bureaucratic power, China. Empires, power, resistance, legacies. When you think of legacy, why do we always think of something phenomenon? Uprising something. It's always what a phenomenon is, isn't it? It's always something triumphant. Battle of something. Rise of the Roman Empire or something. Disastrous. Bureaucratic power, China, 370. In former days, our realm wished to have good and harmonious relations with your Ming, hoping for perpetual peace, since we repeatedly sent letters which were not answered. We invaded deep into your country 4 times until your destiny showed regret. How stubborn it was not to comply. Now the Ming has been extinguished by roving bandits, and its service to heaven is a thing of the past. Let us speak no more of that. The empire is not an individual's private property. Whoever possesses virtue holds it. The army and the people are not an individual's private property. Whoever possesses virtue commands them. We now occupy the empire. On behalf of your destiny, we took revenge upon the enemies of your ruler father. We burned our bridges behind us, and we have pledged not to return until every bandit is destroyed. In the counties, districts, and locals that we pass through, all those who are able to shave their heads and surrender, opening their gates to welcome us, will be given rank and reward, retaining their wealth and honour for generations. But if there are those who disobediently resist us when our great armies arrive, then the stones themselves will be set ablaze and will be massacred. Scholars of resolve will reap the harvest of upright administration, meritorious fame, and the opportunity to pursue a vacation. If there are those who lack faith in us, then how are they to serve the empire? King's conquest also raised the minority rule question, especially as Ming loyalists still control much of China. The Qing even compelled all Chinese men to adopt the jerkin hairstyle, shaved forehead with remaining hair plaited in a queue at the back. As a sign of allegiance, how could this non-Han people establish a conquest after the conquest? A basis for effectiveness. Section 2 looks at what we might call repertories of power in detail, but first, Section 1.4 focuses on the 3 main supports: military, administrative, and ethnic sovereignty. Page 371. The military, its role in rule and expansion. The first foundation of Qing dominance was raw military power, fueled by the banner system and a willingness to interrogate some non-Manchu into it, by acceptance of defectors as allied forces, and by marriage and other alliances with Mongol leaders. The Qing combined the best of Mongol mounted warfare with Chinese traditions of crossbowmen and organised infantry, as well as the addition of artillery from 1636. Their battlefield success and ability to secure one province after another was interpreted as proof of superior virtue in the eyes of heaven. By the 1600s, Manchu sovereignty was widely accepted, and as the Qing continued to advance, more and more Ming generals and officials took up service. Three key prominent Ming generals, including Wang Sanggu, were made semi-autonomous governors of southern provinces, the so-called three feudatories. Page 372. The banners were garrisoned around China in separate walled communities, often inside cities, with land taken from dispossessed Chinese elites. These elites were assigned to provide support, initially in the provision of labourers in serf-like conditions. They provided a core guarantee of Qing sovereignty, while Han Green Standard troops added numbers. For over a century, the combination of Manchu and allied Mongol and Chinese forces meant that the Qing state was East Asia's superpower. Over the 17th and 18th centuries, then, the Qing reunified the CCS and doubled the size of territory dominated by the core Chinese state, adding the island of Taiwan in 1683 and vast areas of Inner Asia, including much of Mongolia and Tibet. In the far west, their borders extended to Dzungaria, and the Chirim Basin, today's Xinjiang. In the vast expanses of the west, the key conflict was with the Dzungar Khanate. To the west of Mongolia until the 1680s, Emperor Kang Xi felt domination of the Khanate, and its western Mongols unlikely to be worthwhile. It was distant, its people were intractable, and the territory had little tax potential. But in the 1680s, the Dzungar Khan was Golden Taziran. His brother was killed by the Khalkhay Mongols of Mongolia, who Galdan then attacked. If Galdan could add Outer Mongolia to his territories, it produced a large Khanate, undermined the core Qing alliance with northern Mongols, as so threatened the Qing power. Galdan's attack sent the Khalkhay Mongols, allies as tributaries of the Qing, running to the Qing to seek help. What followed was roughly 80 years of hot and cold war with the Dzungars, including competition for predominant influence in Tibet from 1716 to 23. This culminated in the final defeat of the Dzungars in 1755 and near the whipping out of them by 1759 after subsequent revolts. The reduction in numbers was achieved by a policy of killing Dzungar men and enslaving women and children. Disease and people escaping from the area. This depopulated the steppe of the north of today's Xinjiang, which the Qing then absorbed into China, founding the city of Urumqi and encouraging the settlement of Han, Chinese, and others of the northwest Xinjiang. In the south of today's Xinjiang, meanwhile, Turkic-speaking Uyghurs were glad to be rid of Dzungar domination. They had helped Manchu forces with the logistics and continued to live under the leadership of Uyghur landlords, who now had to be confirmed by the Xing court and travelled to Beijing periodically. By the 1760s, then, the Qing were bringing Xinjiang, about one-sixth of the area of modern China, into China's orbit. Xinjiang being a territory with Muslim Uyghur domination to the south, but populated by multiple ethnicities. From that point forward, the Qing provided a regular subsidy to support the area's garrison. Despite this, it only became a formal province in 1884 after a local revolt. It meant it briefly, 1864 to 77, become an independent Islamic state. Qing's success beyond the Great Wall in both the north and the northwest ended the threat to steppe invasion of IBN's Kaldun cycle of the mobile warriors of Asabia, or spiritual unity, conquering the plains before declining in spirit and being conquered themselves, as Russia itself defeated Mongol successor Khanates, and China expanded power over their proximate steppes. They met in the middle and defined their boundaries in the Treaty of Nerchinsk of August 1689. This ended the steppe settled cycle and cured Russian Qing border disputes, and so laid the geopolitical foundations of the modern Chinese state. The Department of Frontiers, the Khalkha and other Mongols of Outer Mongolia absorbed from the 1690s onwards, were incorporated as semi-autonomous banners, and each one had its own leader. This individual had to be confirmed or selected by the Qing Department of Foreign Affairs and to visit the Qing court regularly. They were thus kept separate and controlled indirectly rather than directly absorbed into the core Chinese bureaucratic system. The Department of Frontiers would be the main controlling agent for Outer Mongolia, Tibet, Xinjiang, and Russian Chinese relations. Familiar sides of the map, note that the names of some provinces and look at location of Guangdong province and its city of Canton, both which we will revisit later, and of some principal areas which the Xing added, including those incorporated as protectorates. What is the last date given for the province, shaded in light purple colour, being gained? The spectrum for the full integration to full indirect rule. Cast your mind back on you to how can they deceive? You could easily interpret the map as showing the distinct things, hard areas of China, direct Chinese administration, coloured light yellow green, and indirectly influenced protectorates and outer regions in darker green. But the history of one province can serve as a warning. Let's take Qinghai as an example. Qinghai is one of China's largest provinces, yet it is sparsely populated. The Han Dynasty had established dominance there and given it as a governor. But control ebbed and flowed between China, Tibet, and Muslim Khanates. Technically, it was regained as a province by the king in 1724. In reality, its thinly inhabited uplands were only partially digested. Many ethnic groups long enjoyed substantial autonomy under their own leaders. Only gradually has the Han Chinese population grown to a slight majority today. So we might think of a spectrum of integration, highest in the eastern provinces and weakening as you head towards the western extremities. Progress whereby additional areas in the western provinces turned into counties and were administered directly was a slow one. Arguably, it was a unique position of the Manchus, who were partly Sinicized but held ties to Inner Asia and had alliance with the Mongols. That allowed them to subdue both plain and steppe so effectively. The expansion raised the question of what degree China was also an external empire. How far did the rule of some areas remain imperial? That is to say, based on difference rather than integrative. The integrative approach, just turning new areas into Chinese provinces, subdividing them into counties, and having centrally appointed officials and modular style adoption of Chinese processes of governance, administration, and tradition. In the first, support of the Qing power was military. The second was administrative. Qing adopted using Mongol Chinese tradition, for instance, respect the examination system of the Confucian learning and patronized Confucian and Taoist temples, even as they continued in their adherence to Lamist Buddhism. The favoured religion of the Mongols from Genghis Khan onwards centred on the Tibetan religious leader or Lama. Ethnic sovereignty or politics of difference. The third main support was preservation of the conquest elite's distinctiveness, maintenance and Manchu identity, language, martial skills, culture, and privileges, such as the Manchus alone, on the most inner councils, and Manchu and banner preferences in other appointments and examinations, was key. They sought to be seen as both legitimate Chinese emperors. Guilong had thousands of Chinese poems ascribed to him, and distinctively Manchu Inner Asian, as well as the maintainers of difference. They tried, for instance, to limit Han Chinese migration to Manchuria. Qing challenges in the 18th century, even as Qing destiny expanded China to perhaps its greatest territorial reach ever. Problems started to appear. This section raises some of the greatest challenges, including ensuring efficiency and honesty across such vast expanses. Challenges from Kuai-Long's reign. In the mid 18th century, Qing China's borders were secure. Its meritocratic bureaucracy, admired by European Enlightenment writers, many literati pushed a Koanzeng evidential research approach to areas such as mathematics and geography. Yet when it clashed with Britain from 1839 to 1842, the Qing destiny would be humiliated given Britain's population of 20 million and China's of 400 million. How did this happen? First, we have already seen the 10 weaknesses. The bureaucracy had shallow reach with high potential for corruption in taxation by local agents as well as for shipping of tax by county magistrates and local figures who collected it for them. Tax came most from agriculture, with rates low to reinforce regime legitimacy. This left potential for military underinvestment, especially in times of inflation. In addition, the banners were originally a battle-hardened conquest elite, but over time become a garrison force, supporting land and subsidies could not keep pace with the surging banner population, meaning some took other jobs or neglected training. The Green Standard, meanwhile, may have had only a proportion of its official 660,000 troops by the early 1800s, due to recording ghost soldiers registered locally, but not actually raised in order to capture central funding. Second, the destiny sought performance legitimacy, so scoring traditional Chinese forms and government and low taxes. This was vulnerable to downturns and the pressures from population growth overturned the supply of new and underused land, military failure, local corruption of natural disasters, and epidemics might undermine its mandate of heaven, as they had in the Ming destiny. If so, persistent reservoirs and anti-Qing Manchu feeling might be mobilized by religious leaders, local gentry or area, and lineage associations. This was doubly so as the Qing responded to multiple late 18th century rebellions by allowing local officials and gentry to raise more militias. Emperors also needed to constantly innovate to ensure corruption was constrained and accurate information received. But the Kang excise secret memorial system became more perfunctory under later emperors. The ability to identify problems and enforce solutions declined. Dai argues that Qing were a semi-feudal elite in alliance with Han Chinese landowners and bureaucratics. Confucian legalist philosophy, combined with a favouring of these groups' interests, kept China stuck in a pre-capitalist stage. The king favoured landowners as evidenced by a low agriculture tax, by avoiding instability, for instance. They wanted coal mines kept small to avoid labour concentration, and they constrained foreign traders to be specified ports because of their large agriculture tax base. They also did not need much merchant help. In Europe, by contrast, monarchs gave company charters that guaranteed monopolies, for instance, England's Royal African Company for slave trading. Moreover, European states, beset by multiple wars due to Europe's fragmented state system, turned to capitalists for loans, agreed higher taxes with them, and gave them influence in the assemblies. By contrast, the Queen's regional preeminence reduced eternal threats, and thus the need to harness merchant cooperation. The burgeoies in select European countries therefore developed more quickly and fostered a capitalist stage of production before China could make the leap and before it was confronted militarily. There's a Western version of this approach, which asks why there was a great divergence between Europe and once vanguard Eastern states, such as China after the 1750s. Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations argued that travel accounts from Marco Polo, 13th century onwards, showed China little change over centuries. It was long, stationary, with low wages. In fact, recent scholarship claims that up to 1750s, the Yangtze River area was comparable to England, albeit trade was far more important as a tax source to England. In England, when Adam Smith was writing, it seemed to the Queen that they were an advanced state. Europe imported increasing volumes of Chinese ceramics, silk and tea, but offered little black. Hence British East India Company merchants who enjoyed the monopoly of China trade to Britain until 1833 unfunded purchases with silver. In China, the consumption of Chinese goods, life expectancy after one, and housing was equal to that of prosperous European countries around 1800. Some more recent theories suggest not so much that China did anything wrong as that Northwest Europe enjoyed exceptional market stimuli and geographical good fortune, which fueled a great divergence. Europeanism cultural models, Landese and DA. Confucian legalist culture did not promote scientific style. Newtonian thought based on principles. Queen, as a semi-feudal class, favoured stability over market freedoms and merchant interests. Landese also emphasised an older approach to European work ethic and entrepreneurial culture, providing deep roots of European takeoff, beginning from 1500. High-level equivalent, Trapp and ecological Elvin Fairbank. High population output and efficiency and market integration meant limited Chinese motive to employ labour-saving devices or innovate further low-cost labour as always an option. Even canal boats were pulled by men, not horses. After 1760s, population had outstripped land, leading to a failing surplus yield per farm rate and so increasing pressures. Taken together, the juncture of market signals, scientific thinking, and geographic endowment supercharged the Western, especially British, Industrial Revolution. As we shall see, this meant that conflict came British and Chinese ships, and armaments were miles apart. Page 380. The management of the barbarian trade and relations. Queen China's actions made it less likely it could be quickly perceive and adapt to Northwest Europe's surging innovation in late century. China saw missionary contact with ordinary Chinese people strictly limited and management of barbarian trade restricted to limited locations at the empire's periphery. By 1760, European trade was focused solely on Guangzhou, Canton of the south coast. In the Canton system, foreign merchants built factories placed where factors or traders resided outside the main city where for limited periods they could trade. Retiring to Portuguese held Makio in between. Trade only with approved Chinese merchants, the Hong merchants. From Western perspective, this was intensely frustrating, especially as it coincided with the booming tea exports, following steep reductions in the tea duty for import into Britain in 1784. Traders believed the superintendent and Hong merchants added cost, and they distrusted a Chinese legal system presided by officials with no juries or professional lawyers, force used in interrogation, and penalties including strangulation. They wanted free access to Chinese cities to buy and sell. This was the period in which pressure for free trade was growing in Britain. Singapore was set up as a free trade port in 1819. The IC monopolies of India and China had ended in 1813, 1833, and there were a steep reduction in British tariffs over 1840s and 1860s. The foreign management system also restricted the possibility of China market more dynamically adopting Western innovations. We can glimpse this by looking at Chinese responses to a Macartney mission. China still tried to manage near neighbours and Europeans by the tribute system. Select foreigners were granted audience at the imperial court and gave tribute. By contrast, more regular trade was handled at a distance through licensed merchants. It held responsible for foreigners' behaviour. By the Canton system and at Kayati and the Mongolian-Russian border for Russia. Britain wanted a direct representative in Beijing so that it could increase exports to China, thereby reducing reliance on silver to pay for Chinese goods. A representative sent to establish the Dyed en route in 1787 and 1793. Lord Macartney arrived with instructions to secure an audience with the Emperor, open new ports, ease restrictions at Guangzhou, and ideally secure a cession from the territory to trade from. He was also to secure a permanent mission in Beijing. In return, he would present gifts and conform to any court ceremony that did not diminish the envoys of king's dignity. When Lord Macartney was granted an audience from 14th September 1793, he took a knee and bowed 3 times, declining to kowtow prostrate unlike other European envoys before him. By calling long, therefore, his proposals unnecessary. In addition, he worried Britain might have encouraged a recent attack on Tibet by the King of Nepal, which it had not, though the EIC did have increasing interest in its Tibetan neighbour. What was the Emperor's attitude? What are his decisions? What is his underlying reason for the decisions?